They remember the name on suits and perfume bottles. But few remember the man, the life behind the label, the thread behind the fabric. My name is Hugo Ferdinand Boss, and I was not born into luxury, nor did I rise without compromise. My legacy is as sharply cut as the garments I once made, stitched with precision, shadowed by decisions, and tailored by the times in which I lived. I was born on July 8, 1885, in Metzingen, a small town in the Kingdom of Württemberg, part of the German Empire. We were not wealthy, but we were proud. My parents, Louisa and Heinrich, ran a modest business, a family of artisans and shopkeepers. From a young age, I understood the value of craft, the dignity in labor, and the discipline of order. I was not a dreamer. I was a doer, practical, focused, determined. As a child, I apprenticed with a merchant. Not a tailor, not yet, but commerce was in the air. The smell of fabric, the sound of ledgers, the clatter of the sewing machine. It stayed with me. When my father died, I inherited more than grief. I inherited the weight of responsibility. There was no time for mourning, only motion. And so I moved, into business, into work, into the future. In 1924, after serving in World War I, I founded my own clothing company, Hugo Boss. It started small: workwear, raincoats, uniforms. We manufactured practical garments for practical people. It was not glamorous, but it was steady. Germany in the post-war years was a nation in pieces, hungry for structure, for direction. I gave them uniforms, symbols of belonging, of unity, of strength. The winds of politics were shifting. The Weimar Republic was chaotic, and amid the uncertainty, a new force rose: the National Socialist German Workers' Party. In 1931, I joined the party. I do not deny it. It is written in the archives and sewn into my history. Why did I join? Some say conviction. Others say opportunism. For me, it was survival, alignment with power in a time when power was the only currency. Our company began producing uniforms, first for the SA, then the SS, the Hitler Youth, and other branches of the Nazi regime. Black wool, silver piping, tight cuts, and hard lines. Garments meant to impress, to intimidate, to command. We tailored the image of control, and it worked. Our business grew, our orders expanded, and our profits surged. But behind the profits were people, and behind the people were shadows. During the war, like many factories in the Reich, our workforce included forced laborers, prisoners of war, civilians from occupied territories, men and women who did not choose to sew our designs. They worked long hours, under strict conditions. I oversaw the factory. I signed the documents. I cannot say I did not know. I can only say I did not stop it. The war ended, and the reckoning began. I was tried by a Denazification tribunal and labeled a beneficiary of the regime. I was fined, stripped of voting rights, and banned from running my company. I did not argue. I accepted it. I was not the monster they imagined, but I was not innocent either. I had complied. I had profited. I had tailored for the wrong side of history. I spent my final years watching others take over what I had built. My son-in-law, Eugen Holy, and later my grandson Jochen, would carry the name forward, not as a mark of shame, but as a promise to remake it. They moved the brand from uniforms to suits, from politics to fashion. They did what I could not. They transformed Hugo Boss from a past bound by ideology into a future stitched with elegance. I died in 1948, just 3 years after the war. Not a hero, not a villain, but a man caught in the storm of history trying to keep his footing as the winds tore across Europe. My name lives on, in boutiques and fashion shows, on labels and tags. But names are easy, stories are harder, and mine is not a comfortable one. I do not ask for forgiveness, only understanding. I was a businessman in a broken world, making choices in a time when neutrality was a fantasy. Some of those choices haunt me. Some sustained me, but all of them, every stitch, every seam, were mine. So when you wear the suit, remember the tailor. Not just the fabric, but the hands that shaped it. The past does not vanish because it is inconvenient. It remains, like the label inside the collar, close to the skin. After the war, silence hung heavier than guilt. My name had become a question, not a brand, not yet a symbol, but a wound. To some, I was simply another collaborator, a name among many, etched into court transcripts and business records. To others, I was something more troubling, a mirror. Not a monster, not a martyr, but a man who thrived in the machinery of evil without raising a gun or a flag. Just a man with a needle and thread, and that made it worse. In the courtroom, they laid out the evidence. My early membership in the party, the contracts, the wages paid to forced laborers, the expansion of my factory after the Nazi rise to power, the photographs of men in black uniforms, pressed and polished under lights, marching in ranks dressed by my hand. I did not deny the facts. I signed the papers. I accepted the judgment. They called me a Mitläufer, a follower, a man who went along with the system, neither driving it nor resisting it. That word became my epitaph long before I died. And yet, I lived. For 3 more years, I watched the wreckage of the country rebuild itself from the ash. Metzingen had been spared the worst of the bombs, but not of the memory. My factory stood, wounded, but intact. I was no longer allowed to lead it. The Denazification tribunal barred me from running any business. So I stepped aside. Eugen Holy, my son-in-law, took over operations. I watched him cautiously at first, then with relief. He was a man of different times, of quieter ambition, but sharper vision. He knew that our past could not be erased, only redesigned. He began with practicality: suits, jackets, civilian clothing. The uniforms were gone. The insignias, the rank stripes, the armbands, gone. In their place, lapels, cuffs, clean lines. It would be decades before the world forgave the name, and longer still before they forgot what it had once been. I did not live to see the rise. I died in 1948 on August 9th. Quietly, without ceremony. My death passed mostly unnoticed outside of Metzingen. There were no editorials, no retrospectives, just a man buried beneath stone and memory. But my name did not die. The company carried on, reshaped and rebranded. In the 50s, it grew modestly. In the 60s, it found its rhythm. And in the 70s, decades after I'd been lowered into the ground, it exploded. Suits became our signature: precision tailoring, modern cuts, masculine silhouettes. The Hugo Boss name began appearing in advertisements, magazines, window displays from Paris to New York. No one mentioned the past. No one wanted to. In the 80s, the brand became synonymous with sleek success, men in power, men in motion, the corporate warrior look. My name, once whispered in tribunals, was now emblazoned in gold letters above boutique doors. Hugo Boss became aspirational. But history is not a fabric you can cut clean. In the 90s and early 2000s, as Germany reckoned again with its past, investigative journalists and scholars began to ask questions. Books were written, articles published, my early party membership, the use of forced labor, the tailoring of uniforms for a regime built on death. The company responded. Apologies were issued. Documents were released. A commission was formed to investigate our wartime activities. Reparations were paid into remembrance foundations. The truth was acknowledged. Some said it was too little, too late. Others said it was more than most ever did. But what mattered to me, even from beyond the veil, was that the story was told, not with pride, but with precision. Because the danger of forgetting is not that it erases pain, but that it permits repetition. I will not defend what I did. I can only describe the world I lived in, one where complicity was currency, and silence was the price of survival. I built uniforms, not ideology. But those uniforms became part of the machine, and the machine became a graveyard. I am not proud of that. But I will not lie to you either. I was a man who wanted to build something that lasted, and I did. But I did not imagine the cost. I did not foresee the generations who would carry that name without knowing the weight behind the logo. So if you wear the suit, wear it with awareness. Elegance means nothing without ethics. And a label, no matter how finely stitched, is always sewn onto something older than fabric, memory. My story is not about fashion. It is about the choices made when the world loses its shape. I chose wrong again and again. And though I died a quiet death, my shadow is long. But perhaps in speaking plainly, in acknowledging fully, in remembering honestly, that shadow can become something else. Not a stain, but a warning. I did not live to see what my name became. By the time the world began whispering it with admiration again, I had long turned to dust. But brands outlive bodies. Logos endure. The label stitched into a collar is more permanent than a man's memory. And so, while I lay beneath the earth, my name rose, silently, steadily, back into the light. In the 1950s, Germany was rebuilding. Cities, roads, identities. Factories that once made uniforms for war were now making clothes for peace. Mine was one of them. Under the quiet leadership of Eugen Holy, my son-in-law, Hugo Boss, the company distanced itself from Hugo Boss, the man. There were no photos of me in the new catalogs, no mention of my political past. The name remained, but the face faded. I was not erased, just shelved. The 60s came, and with them, a hunger for modernity. The suits we made were sharp, minimalist, powerful. We dressed businessmen, not battalions. The cut of the lapel became the new insignia. It whispered dominance without shouting ideology. It was clean, stylish, silent. By the 70s and 80s, the brand had reinvented itself entirely. Hugo Boss was no longer a tailor in Metzingen. It was a symbol, sleek, masculine, elite. Celebrities wore it, executives craved it. The brand entered Formula One sponsorship, fashion magazines, global runways. The past was not gone, but it had been buried under layers of elegance. I watched from the silence of memory. And yet, memory has teeth. In the 90s, historians began to dig. Journalists found the threads. The suits looked too good, too clean, for a story that was so complicated. Books were written, archives released, evidence revisited. My party membership, the contracts with the SS, the forced laborers in my factory. None of it had vanished. It was only waiting. And so the questions came. Who was Hugo Boss? The company commissioned an independent historical study. In 1999, the results were published. It confirmed the truth. I had joined the Nazi Party early, benefited from the regime, and used forced laborers during the war. The company issued a formal apology. Reparations were paid. The name was not abandoned, but acknowledged. Some applauded the honesty. Others said it was long overdue. Some argued that brands must take responsibility. Others said the man was dead. Let the label live. But I had lived, and I had chosen. There are those who say, he was a businessman, not a politician. But the lines blur. The uniforms we sewed were not neutral. They carried rank, fear, identity. They were tools of a system. To pretend I did not know is a lie. I knew. I chose profit over protest, order over resistance, silence over courage. My suits fit history like a second skin. And so what becomes of a legacy like mine? A name tied to both precision and submission, to style and submission, to craftsmanship and complicity. I'll tell you what I hope. I hope you don't forget. Not out of guilt, not to dwell in shame, but because forgetting allows repetition. And repetition is the true tailor of tyranny. Let my name be a lesson stitched into time, that the past does not vanish with the last breath. It lingers in ink, in archives, in seams. Today, Hugo Boss is a global fashion empire. It no longer belongs to me, and perhaps it never did. The people who run it now build suits, not ideologies. And that's good. I don't resent them. I only hope they walk forward with eyes open, not closed. If you wear my name, wear it with knowledge, with eyes that have read more than the price tag. The truth is not always flattering, but it is always necessary. We don't get to choose how the world remembers us, but we can choose whether we speak the truth before we are gone. I did many things, some admirable, some despicable, most complex. This is my last stitch, my last confession, my last design. A story, told honestly. I was Hugo Boss, and you've been wearing my shadow.